bitch be popping. I'm sitting at my locker, and all the boys be stopping. It's popping.
Hello, you dirty potters. How are you today? Today we're going to be talking about raw work. Now, raw work is pretty simple. Raw work is usually categorized as glazing the inside or the food safe areas of any product while leaving the rest of the body very raw, not even glazing it. This has been called many different names throughout history. It's been called semi-raw work, raw product, raw work. It's been called a bunch of things. But one thing that they all have in common is that they're still extremely usable, but they save you quite a bit of time, money, and glaze. You'll usually end up seeing many production potters use this technique, especially if they're making a bunch of stuff at a time. Imagine this, you only have a little tiny bit of glaze left in this bottle. Maybe you have about that much, but your next kiln load that you have to fill up requires you to fill these 4 orders, or possibly just glaze these 4 bowls, even if you don't even have orders. You're still trying to stretch this amount of glaze in these 4 bowls. So what do? So quite some time ago, a couple potters figured out, well, technically speaking, we only have a tiny bit of glaze left, but these products can still be used as long as the food safe areas are still intact, right? It's not like people are putting food on the outside of their cups and bowls and plates. So why don't we just glaze the inside where the food's gonna touch, a little bit of the outside, and make it a new style of artwork? Let's call it raw work. A quick story before we move further. Now, I don't actually know where this technique technically comes from. It could have come from China. I have high bets on China. It could have come from Japan. It could have come from Greek. It could have come from Norway. I have no idea. All I do know is that the potter lore that my teacher told me a very long time ago is this. A very long time ago, potters were pretty much treated as second-class citizens, especially in the Grecian days. All your pots that you made were pretty much used for daily usages. They were made for carrying water, storing stuff like grains, anything from that to chamber pots, which if you don't know what a chamber pot is, I highly suggest you look it up on Google right now. Actually, no, you don't have to. I'll put it right there for you. I'm sorry I did that to your eyes. Potters were extremely poor and basically went through all types of health problems. Your back hurt from spinning pots all day long. You probably had silicosis or potter's lung, as many of us call it, and you were paid per every pot that you made. And you had to make an extreme amount of stuff to make ends meet at the end of the month. I don't know if ancient Greco-Romans paid rent. I'd be paying rent. I don't know if they paid rent. And there were mainly 2 different types of pottery that they sold. There was the functional stuff, which is made for everyday use, bowls, dishes, chamber pots. And then there was the really fancy stuff, the high dollar stuff that I've shown you before in a previous episode. These require a very large amount of work, and sometimes you had a production line. So you had one person glazing, you had one person using slip, you had one person carving through the slip using sgraffito work, and then brushing that stuff off and firing it. But of course, a lot of the functional stuff that you made was made in stacks like this. They had hundreds and hundreds of these bowls, but sometimes you didn't have enough glaze to make all the bowls. You didn't go to the store, you didn't go to the mountain, you didn't pick up the necessary materials, you didn't have time to mix them. Let's say you had 100 bowls to glaze, but only about 80 bowls worth of glaze left in your batch. And that's kind of where raw work was born. It's a style in which you can save money, time, and quite a bit of glaze just by glazing the necessary parts of the pot, still making them food safe, and still kind of getting away with just not glazing the high majority of your pot, I would say. And over time, it became more of a style than functionality, paying homage to the low-class potters that most likely made this technique in order to survive and make ends meet. But nowadays, you'll mostly just see like potters who make the same thing over and over again do this technique in order to save glaze and money, so take it how you want to take it.
Donte, did you just open the camera to tell us a little bit of potter lore and then, like, you're gonna go now?
No, I wouldn't do that to you. How dare you? How dare you assume that? I'm gonna show you guys how I glaze my raw work, and I'm also gonna give you a tiny kiln opening at the end of this video. How dare you? How dare you insinuate that I would muff you like that, alright? You owe me a like down below. How dare you? Think this is a gamer out here? I wouldn't debate you like that. So not only am I gonna show you guys how I glaze my raw work today, I'm also gonna give you a tiny kiln opening. I have some of these swirl raw bowls here. I have a swirly cup because I do realize that the high majority of people that use this technique are just using it for marbleized clay bodies. And I've also loaded old Redricks here with a little bit of raw work as well. So at the end of this video, we're going to have ourselves a tiny kiln opening.
What you know? They said my lip gloss is who? My lip gloss be popping. I'm standing at my locker, and all the boys be stopping. Mac, L'Oreal, yep, cause I'm worth it. Oh.
Now there's two ways that people usually do raw work. Way number one is probably what you're not going to see most of the time, where they'll mix their glaze up, they'll get their bowl or whatever have you, and they'll put the glaze on the inside of the bowl and just wish it around a little bit.
Mac brushes, L'Oreal got them watermelon crushes. That's probably the reason all these boys got crushes. Time for lunch, my lips.
They'll go right up to the edge and they'll let the rest of it out. Take a sponge or whatever have you and just clean up the edges a tiny bit. And this is now ready to go inside the kiln. You didn't even have to glaze the outside. That's probably the easiest glaze job that I've ever seen. You see, I just saved a bunch of glaze by not only not glazing the outside of my pot, but also the rest of the glaze I didn't use, I just dumped right back in there. After watching me glaze these bowls, it's probably very apparent why potters who are especially in the low class end of the spectrum found this technique really desirable as a style. I just saved literally half of my glaze per product. I only had to glaze the inside, I don't have to glaze the outside at all, which is already saving me glaze, and the glaze that I didn't use when I rolled it out on the inside, I just put right back into the bucket. I probably just saved myself a lot of glaze by glazing these two, and these two bowls are probably just one bowl's worth of glaze if I glaze the entire thing. Raw work potter tip! Technically speaking, although I don't think a lot of potters run into this, you can have these two touch in the kiln. Although it is a glaze kiln, there's no glaze on the outside of this while touching to make them stick to each other. There's no silica on the outside, or at least not enough to make them fuse. So if you really wanted to, when you put these in the kiln, you can technically put them like this, and they'd be just fine. They come out regular. You just gotta like, apart a little bit, and they come out just like they would in the bisque. The second way that you're going to see most people use this technique is that they will glaze the inside of a product like this, roll it out like we did just before with the bowls,
Still rock, low mama melon with the hot pink top, cherry, vanilla, flavors is a virtue, they loving, lip gloss,
and not only will they glaze the inside to make it food safe, they'll usually take it and dip it a tiny bit on the outside edge, usually where a person's lips would touch the cup. And this is all you really need. This is the way that you're most likely going to see raw work be produced out in the wild. Usually people don't want to feel a rough surface on their lips, so they usually just dip it real quick and glaze the very top of the outside while still saving a bunch of money, time, and glaze. And please note, I've been dipping my stuff the entire time by just using this little tiny ladle, but you haven't seen me use tongs one time in this entire episode. That's because you don't need tongs with the glaze technique. You really just need a ladle to put stuff inside, roll it out, and if you really want to, you do a little hand dip because the rest of the clay body isn't even touched by glaze. You can end up really clean after this technique because glaze isn't just flying everywhere. I say as I clean up glaze over here because I was super messy while I was glazing. Let's do this last set of bowls and then put them in the kiln, huh?
perfect. Oh, the way I put it on so perfect. Right, the corners of my mouth, so I work it when I walk down the hallway. They can't say nothing. Oh, 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 my lips so luscious. The way I spice it up with the Mac brushes. L'Oreal got them watermelon crushes. That's probably the reason all these boys got crushes. Time for lunch, my lips still rock. Low mama melon with the hot pink top. Cherry, vanilla, flavors is a virtue. They loving.
Alright, now let's put these in the kiln and see how they come out.
Cherry, vanilla, flavors is a virtue.
Don't diss me, senpai!
Lip gloss universal. The boys really like it. The girls don't speak. They rolling their eyes. They lip gloss cheap. It ain't my fault, but I can upgrade. Just show you how to use nice things with nice flavors. What you know about me? What you know about me? What you know about me? What you know? They said my lip gloss is who? My lip gloss be popping. I'm standing at my locker and all the boys stopping. It's popping. I don't know. It's popping. Let's go.
Hopefully you guys see what I mean now. It's actually really easy to do this style of artwork and save a bunch of time and glaze. You can probably see how this style was really attractive to potter families that were very low class in saving money, time, materials, etc. But nowadays it's just considered something that kind of harkens to the past a little bit. And the outside, hopefully you can hear it, is completely raw, while the inside, the place that you would put food on, is completely safe to eat off of. You can still put food in this, eat off it, and be fine. And you can wash it, they clearly didn't microwave it that long ago, but like, we can still microwave this. And you also get the added bonus of getting to see that beautiful clay on the outside. The high majority of people that do this technique will either color the clay, leave it raw, or marbleize it so that you can see the beauty on the outside, while still making the inside food safe, as I said before. But at the same time, this used to be a technique to help very low-class potters and their low-class families just kind of make ends meet. And don't forget, you don't have to use a clear gloss glaze like most people do. You can very easily still do this raw work technique with any glaze you want. This is my Randy's Red, mixed in with my Jeff Campana's Mistake Blue.
What you know about me? What you know about me? What you know? Except my lip gloss is who? My lip gloss be popping. I'm standing at my locker and all the boys be stopping. It's popping.
As a bonus point, there's a lot of people out there in the world, much like myself, that are very tactile. They're very physical learners. I don't do very well just opening up a book and staring at a page all day and regurgitating information as, intelligence. I didn't look. I'm trying to tell you I didn't do very well in school. Okay, okay. The truth came out. I'm sorry. But whenever you find someone like myself who gets a good amount of information from just touching clay bodies and getting real tactile information off of it, this is one of those techniques where you'll give this to one of those people and they'll just sit there and do this for a long time, for hours at a time. It's a little bit therapeutic at the same time. I don't think this is a normal person thing. I think this is just a tactile or a kinetic person thing, people who learn in that style. But I mean, I can't keep these, or else I'm pretty much just gonna ceramaphile touch these all day. So I'm just gonna put them in the store now. Potter tip / kind of a technique, honestly. While raw work is really simple, it pretty much razors down to glazing the outside of something right here and the inside of most of the food safe places. You can also very easily do something like this, where you glaze the inside completely and then leave the outside raw, but if you trim a little line into your bowl beforehand, you can very easily put glaze in that line and you have a little style of your very own. This still saves a good amount of glaze, but this does really look like someone put intent and style and some type of sense of artisticness. It looks like someone actually cared about the product instead of just being well, put it down there, roll it out, dip it a little bit, and there you go, and sell it online. If you play around with the raw work or the style of raw work, it actually looks like you were trying to make something instead of just saving yourself money on time and glaze. Oh, what? You want a little close-up inside here? You want to see what's inside the bowl, you dirty little potter? All right, but you better be clicking that like button.
What you know about me? What you know about me? What you know? Except my lip gloss is who? My lip gloss be popping. I'm standing at my locker and all the boys be stopping. Mac, L'Oreal, yep, 'cause I'm worth it. Oh, the way I put it on so perfect. Wipe the corners of my mouth so I work it when I walk down the hall where they can't say nothing. Oh, my lips so luscious. The way I spice it up with the Mac brushes. L'Oreal got them walk.
Well, thank you, Dirty Potters, for joining me today. Hopefully this kind of helps you guys understand what's going on in the ceramic art world, but this was really just a technique that was used a very long time ago for very low-class, poor potter families that don't have the time or money or resources to buy more glaze or something of that matter. It was really just a way to either save money on time and glaze. Our society's a little better about that. I'm not gonna pretend there's not still starving people in the world, but I highly doubt a lot of the starving people are potters, unless you're a production potter and you're getting paid 20 cents per pot, in which case, bro, I'm sorry. I also wanted to show you this technique just because there's so many people who have this much glaze inside of their bottles left, and what do I do with it? Now you can very easily just put it in a bowl, roll it out, wipe it off the top, and call it raw work. But remember, the real trick to this technique is making the outside more beautiful than the rest of the clay body. If you can prove to people that not glazing the outside of a bowl makes it look a little bit more attractive, like something like this, or even putting your own spin on it, something like this, then you pretty much just made it just as... Oh no! Thank you, Dirty Potters, for joining me today. If you'd like to see any of my artwork, the links are always down below for your beautiful potter faces to see. We have the brand new store/website/ somebody gave me a website and they let me do literally anything I want with it. It's their funeral at this point. The Instagram and the Facebook to keep up with all my work and see pretty pottery pictures. I also reactivated my Twitter. Find me if you can. hopefully me explaining some of the lore of potter culture, as well as some of the stuff that you might see online today and think like, oh, it's a brand new technique, or oh, I don't know what that is. That's pretty much what it is. But it's basically a technique where you're making the high majority of the clay body raw while leaving the parts that are food safe still glazed and safe to use. Hopefully that explanation has helped you guys out a little bit. I hope you have a good rest of the day, and I will see you, Dirty Potters, next week.
Nice things with nice flavors. What you know about me? What you know about me? What you know about me? What you know? They said my lip gloss is who? My lip gloss be popping. I'm standing at my locker and all the boys.
Word around town has it that that's your mother's favorite type of work. It's raw work.